Now, in today's video, I want to talk about why top-down processing prevents your ASD spouse from noticing your emotional distress. Have you ever found yourself sitting just a few feet away from your ASD partner, barely holding yourself together, just hoping that they'll notice? Your eyes are red, your shoulders are slumped, your voice is quieter than usual, you're answering with one-word responses because you're emotionally exhausted, and inside you're thinking, please see me, but they don't. Instead, they ask if you've paid the electric bill, or they start talking about something completely unrelated, or worse, they seem perfectly content while you're silently falling apart. Now, if you've experienced this, you're not alone. And today, I want to explain one of the least understood neurological reasons this happens. Not because it excuses emotional neglect, not because your pain isn't real, but because understanding the brain often helps us stop personalizing what was never personal. So today, we're going to talk about something called top-down processing, which is a hidden cognitive process that can make an autistic partner appear emotionally blind even while they're looking directly at you. And once you understand this, many confusing moments in your relationship may suddenly make sense. Now let's look at the great misunderstanding. Most neurotypical people assume something very simple. Well, if someone loves me, they'll notice when I'm hurting. Well, that assumption works fairly well in relationships where both brains naturally prioritize emotional information, but ASD changes what information gets prioritized. The issue isn't eyesight, it isn't intelligence, it isn't love, it's attention. More specifically, it's what the brain decides deserves attention. Now, let's look at bottom-up versus top-down processing. We're going to simplify this. Imagine walking through a forest. One person notices every bird, every leaf, every movement, every smell. Their brain builds an understanding from the information entering through their senses. Psychologists call this bottom-up processing. Reality enters first, meaning comes afterward. Now, imagine someone else walking through the same forest carrying a detailed map. Instead of noticing every tree, they're constantly checking whether reality matches the map. Their brain asks, does this fit what I already expect? That's top-down processing. The brain begins with an internal prediction. Reality is filtered through that prediction. Now, both people are seeing the same forest, but they experience completely different worlds. Now let's look at the predictive brain. The autistic brain is often an extraordinarily predictive brain. It loves patterns, rules, consistency, structure, mental models. These internal maps reduce uncertainty, and reducing uncertainty helps reduce cognitive overload. The brain is constantly asking, what normally happens next? What's the routine here? What problem am I trying to solve? Or what am I expecting to see here? Those predictions become incredibly powerful, sometimes more powerful than what's actually happening in the moment. Now let's look at why emotional signals get filtered out. Here's the part almost nobody explains. As the NT spouse, your facial expressions, your posture, your size, your silence, your tears are actually incoming sensory information for your ASD spouse. They're data, but every brain filters sensory information. If it didn't, we'd become overwhelmed instantly. Your ASD partner's brain is doing exactly that. The problem is, which information gets filtered? Suppose your ASD partner walks into the house expecting a normal evening. That expectation becomes today's mental map. The predictive brain now starts sorting information. Dinner? Normal. Television? Normal. Kitchen? Normal. Dog barking? Expected. Your quietness? Ignored. Your tired eyes? Filtered. Your trembling voice? Not registered. Your sadness never becomes part of the brain's active prediction. And information that doesn't fit the prediction often receives remarkably little processing. Not because it wasn't visible, but because it never became neurologically important enough to interpret the prediction. Now, this is where many neurotypical spouses become confused because they'll say, well, he was looking directly at my face. He made eye contact. He saw me. Well, maybe. His eyes may have seen you, but attention isn't the same as vision. Think about driving somewhere familiar. Have you ever arrived home and realized that you barely remember the drive? Your eyes were open. You saw the stoplights, every intersection, every curve, but your brain wasn't deeply processing most of it. It was running a prediction. Much of the journey happened automatically. The same thing can happen socially. An autistic partner can literally look at your face without extracting the emotional meaning your brain assumes is obvious. Now let's talk about why neurotypical partners feel invisible. This creates one of the deepest wounds in neurodiverse marriages. The neurotypical spouse concludes, Well, if he doesn't notice me, then it means I don't matter to him. Well, that conclusion feels emotionally logical, I guess, but neurologically, it's completely inaccurate. He does care deeply, but he also believes everything is fine. His predictive brain never sounded the alarm. No alarm, no emotional response. No emotional response looks like indifference. Indifference gets interpreted as rejection, and rejection creates loneliness, and this cycle repeats and repeats for years. Now let's look at the invisible cognitive bottleneck. Imagine an airport security checkpoint. Thousands of passengers arrive. Only some get through. The rest wait outside. Your ASD partner's brain has something similar. Thousands of pieces of information arrive every second, but only a tiny percentage enter conscious awareness. Questions receive priority. Facts receive priority. Schedules receive priority. Problems receive priority. Changes in routine receive priority. But subtle facial expressions, tiny shifts in emotional tone, unexpected disappointment, these may never reach the front of the line. This is the cognitive bottleneck, not because emotions don't exist, but because competing information crowds them out. Now let's look at why this is different from alexithymia. We've previously talked about alexithymia. That's difficulty identifying or describing emotions. But today's topic happens even earlier. Before emotion is identified, it has to be noticed. Top-down processing affects attention, alexithymia affects interpretation, and interoceptive differences affect internal awareness. And these three can stack together. Imagine trying to hear a whisper. First, the whisper gets filtered by background noise. Then you struggle to recognize the words. Then you're uncertain how you feel about what you heard. That's what most autistic nervous systems experience socially. Now, let's look at why talk therapy sometimes doesn't help. This explains why couples have the same conversation hundreds and hundreds of times. The neurotypical spouse says, "Well, I need you to notice me." And the autistic spouse sincerely agrees, "Yeah. And then nothing changes. Why? Because noticing isn't controlled by good intentions. It's controlled by attention. And attention is heavily influenced by prediction. And no amount of guilt changes the brain's filtering system. Now, let's look at reducing blame with neurological understanding. Now, this doesn't erase accountability. It doesn't mean emotional needs should be ignored. It doesn't mean spouses should simply accept chronic loneliness. No. But it does change the question. So instead of asking, why doesn't he care? Begin asking, what information is his brain actually processing? That's a profoundly different question. One attacks character. The other investigates cognition. One creates shame. The other creates solutions. Now let's look at the empathy cognition gap. Most autistic spouses do indeed possess genuine empathy. They don't enjoy seeing their partners suffer. But empathy can't respond to information that never reaches awareness. Think of empathy as a fire department. The firefighters are ready, they're willing, they're equipped. But if the smoke detector never activates, the trucks never leave the station. That's the empathy cognition gap. The capacity to care exists. The signal never arrived clearly enough. Okay, so what actually works? Okay, this is where many neurotypical spouses have to make a difficult adjustment. Subtle communication often assumes accurate emotional detection. If emotional detection is inconsistent, subtlety becomes invisible. Instead of hoping he'll notice, make the emotional information impossible to miss. That doesn't mean yelling or criticizing. It means becoming explicit. So instead of saying, well, I'm fine, try, I'm feeling emotionally overwhelmed right now, and I need 20 minutes of your full attention, please. And instead of hoping your tears explain everything, say something like, this isn't about solving a problem right now. I just kind of need comfort first. And instead of waiting for him to recognize your silence, say, you know what? My silence means that I'm hurting, not that I want to be left alone. Now, that may be painfully obvious to you, but you're no longer communicating with assumptions. You're communicating with his nervous system. Now let's talk about how to create emotional road signs. Imagine trying to navigate a city where every street sign has been removed. That's what subtle emotional communication can feel like to a brain that depends heavily on explicit structure. Road signs reduce ambiguity. Emotional road signs do the same. So develop shared phrases together, such as yellow light. That means I'm becoming emotionally overwhelmed. Red light. That means I need you to stop what you're doing and connect with me. Comfort mode. That means please don't solve this, just stay with me. Problem-solving mode. That means now I'm ready to think through solutions. These cues remove guesswork and lower the cognitive demand of interpreting subtle emotional signals. Now let's talk about how to build new predictions. The encouraging news is that predictive brains can learn. Every repeated pattern strengthens a new mental map. So if your ASD partner consistently hears direct emotional language paired with clear, predictable responses, guess what? The brain begins to anticipate those signals. And over time, emotional information is more likely to make it through the filter because it has become part of the prediction itself. Now, the goal is not to eliminate top-down processing, because that's a fundamental way that many autistic brains organize the world. Rather, the goal is to expand the predictive model so that emotional cues are no longer treated as background noise, but as meaningful information worthy of attention. Now, if you spent years believing your ASD partner's lack of response meant you were invisible, I hope today's discussion offers a different perspective. Your pain is real. Feeling unseen is one of the deepest wounds a relationship can create. But at the same time, what appears to be emotional coldness may sometimes be the result of a brain that is relying so heavily on internal predictions that it overlooks what's happening right in front of it. Understanding this doesn't erase the hurt, I understand, but it replaces a story of indifference with one of neurological difference. And that shift opens the door to practical change. Now, when couples stop fighting over intentions and begin designing communication that works with the nervous system instead of against it, they often discover that connection becomes far more achievable, not because either partner has changed who they are, but because they finally learned how each other's brains receive the world. Now, if this video helped you understand your relationship in a new way, consider sharing it with someone who has been wondering why love sometimes feels invisible in a neurodiverse marriage. And remember, your ASD partner's brain may not automatically detect every emotional signal, but together you can build a bridge that helps those signals get through. Please like, subscribe. I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you.